Okay, thank you so much for attending this professional development. I have shared the link to the presentation in the chat if you wish to follow along, but I'm going to share my screen so that you can, are you able to see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Perfect, perfect. So the topic is, it's called Read, Teach, sorry, Read, Reach, and Connect. And the big goal of this presentation is to connect our learners with others, other learners, or other adults all over the world to develop a passion for reading and literature. Um, I particularly enjoy doing book clubs in general, just because I have a passion for reading. But I know that sometimes when there are a lot of assignments and discussions connected to reading, then it just tends to become work and not really just reading for fun and enjoyment. So this project is kind of an effort to connect the passion for reading and then just have fun and connect content with it. So I'm going to start with a little bit about myself. I grew up in two other countries. I mostly spent my childhood in Saudi Arabia and then my college years in my home country, which is Pakistan. And I have been in education for 15 years, and 8 of them have been with the district that I'm currently working in Kapel. I'm married, and this is my husband, and I have one son. This is a very young picture of him. He's about 2 inches taller than my husband now. And I just enjoy traveling and playing, or I say playing with Lego, but building Lego. So those are my passions. And I am a big fan of quotes, so I'm going to start with this one by George Martin. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. So I feel like, so especially during the time that we were at home in the pandemic, reading was such a huge comfort because you can travel, you can visit so many different places. And there's one particular book that I really connected with, and I'm going to share a little bit. And that was really an eye-opener for me because it's a book that was set in my home country, and to connect, to be an actual person who lived in that country, and the setting was set in my neighborhood and my kids were reading it. It just connected everything together. Um, do you want to share something about your thoughts towards reading, or if you've had any experiences running a book club, either with learners or just as adults in your life?
So I really don't have experience with the book club, but as school counselor, I do what's called bibliotherapy. And so a lot of the lessons I'm trying to teach, I use children's literature when I'm trying to reach those younger groups. And even middle school, sometimes I use literature for that. So I
Yeah.
think it's a very useful tool um, to get points across to kids. And like you said, they can view things, maybe, they're reading it through the book and they can empathize with the character and not really realizing that, hey, this could be me, or apply it to themselves. So,
Absolutely. That is such a good point. Um, so our um, essential questions for this PD are 3 parts. So our first part is just going to be about read. And the question is, how do I go about picking the right book? Because there's so many choices out there, and where do you start? So that might be, as a teacher, a question that gets asked quite a bit. And then how do I reach out to others to collaborate with? And for connection, what activity will connect our learners? Like, what activities can I do in class that will not only engage my learners, but also connect them with others? So I'd like to start off with, if you can just think about and share a book that left its mark on you and why. And I can start. Um, the Well, my first book that was, I didn't consider a children's book, was John Grisham's The Chamber. And I remember being in high school and reading it, and just the relationship that the grandson had with his father, and the emotions that they went through, where he didn't want to necessarily help him, but he did want to help him. Just the emotional battle that happened between the two characters just left its impact on me. So that was a book that left its mark on me. Would any one of you like to share any book that you think was like your wow book?
Um, so this one's kind of funny, but it was when I was in high school, which probably tells my age. But it got me into reading. I wasn't always a avid reader. I didn't really like to read because I struggled with it when I was growing up, which actually is an asset to me now when I'm teaching. However, it was Harry Potter. I know that sounds, I know, but it really did. She wrote well, and it was just I guess the hype of it, and you always wanted to know what was happening next. And for me, fiction, I just enjoy fiction. I like reading about the storyline, mysteries, things like that. So that
Yeah,
was mine.
awesome. Thank you for sharing.
I can share mine too. So mine was Where the Sidewalk Ends, and we read parts of it when we were in high school, and the imagery that the short stories and poems had in it, they were really impactful in terms of helping me understand the power of writing and how you can transport yourself to different places and make yourself different characters and empathize with the characters in the stories that are being told and the poems that are being written. And it just opens up your perspective on how to deal with one another and experience things maybe that you never thought you were capable of experiencing before. So those are my experiences.
Yes, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. So moving with those thoughts in mind, how do you go about picking the right book? And there are really, I mean, there are lots of ways, but the two that I wanted to talk about were the two ways that you can pick books are, like, you can think of a book based on the current events, like what is happening in your world, because kids are naturally curious about what is happening in their surrounding. And sometimes there are books that are related to that, or maybe there is a classic that you can connect with learners, or with in your discussions, in your conversations, that connect learners to what is happening right now. And then for younger kids, there are lots of opportunities for author studies as well, where you pick one author and then you go through some of their books. That works beautifully with picture books, even with kinder, first and second grade learners. So the next few slides kind of talk about some selections and some book choices. So I mentioned earlier the Global Read Aloud, which is it was started by an author who is originally from Denmark, but she's working here sorry, I didn't mean to say an author, an educator who's originally from Denmark, but she started it here quite some time ago. These are some of the selections for the past 6 years. We're going to start the Global Read Aloud project for 2022. And she has recently, in the past couple of weeks, announced this year's author. But in previous years, Mem Fox, Julie Flett and Monique Gray-Smith, Yuyi Morales, Juana Martinez-Niel, and Duncan Tonatu. These were some authors that were part of the Global Read Aloud. I know that in 2018-19, when I was in the classroom, because I've been an instructional coach for the past 3 years, we focused on Julie Flett and Monique Gray-Smith's, and their focus of their writing. Now, this may sound like a very heavy topic, but it was focused more towards how in Canada, Native Americans, or the original people there, were stripped of their identity, and how they had to be, they had to dress a certain way, they had to have their hair a certain way, and how all of that happened. Now, this seems like a big topic for younger kids, but their books are written around, you know, child-centered themes and relationships with grandparents and things that you like, part of your identity. So the idea of Global Read Aloud for kinder, first, and second grade is that there is one book that you read every week and kids make connection. So it could be a read aloud. It doesn't have to be anything super complicated, but it could be a read aloud, or you could do some small whole group activities with it. Then for second or third, if you have high academic levels of second grade or third grade, they have these early readers. And these were the selections for the 17-18 school year, and then so on. And this is the way the breakdown works, is that the whole book is divided over 6 weeks. The whole project runs for 6 weeks. And then there are certain chapters that you read each week with the learners, and everybody in the world who's participating in the Global Read Aloud is reading the same number of chapters. So then there is more opportunity. It's like a global book club. So everybody can share their thoughts on it. These were selections for middle grade school years. The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. This project, Amal Unbound, is the one that I was talking to a little bit earlier. So as I mentioned, I'm originally from Pakistan, and this story is set literally 2 hours from my hometown. The main character lives there, and her struggles and everything. So I made a huge connection with the main character, Amal, and the way her life was. And so many of my learners did too, because I'm originally from Pakistan, but most of my students are from India, and that's a neighboring country, same customs, same traditions. So it seemed to be a perfect fit for my classroom. Front Desk I've also experienced, and this one is more about this family that immigrates from China, and they're living, or they're running, not owning, but running a hotel, a motel, and they're just their struggles financially, and how she goes to school but is unable to make friends, and this girl's desire to own her own hotel one day. So these two I've had experience with, but India No More and then the Jumbies was last year's. And then these are selections for your middle school or high school choices. A Long Walk to Water is also amazing, beautifully written. And then your young adult choices. So when educators are participating in a Global Read Aloud, again, there could be learners in Canada and they're reading the same book that your kids are. So it gives everyone an opportunity to discuss the chapters, to discuss the actions of the characters happening. Which takes us to the next part. Have you read any of these books in the selection? Any experience with any one of them? Okay. And so the next part is reach. Well, how do I reach out to others? And again, you could do it. It doesn't have to be on a grand scale where you're connecting with somebody in Europe or anywhere else, but you can start with your own district. So it could be like, for example, a 4th grade teacher in my school, and I'm connecting with a 4th grade teacher in another school within the district. So we could have our kids now with Zoom and FaceTime and Teams being so accessible. There are lots of opportunities where kids can interact, or it could be as simple as sharing a Google Doc and having those discussions online, or something like Flipgrid, where they are sharing their thoughts with each other using those resources. Or you can connect with somebody in a different part of the country. You can collaborate with other educators. Because it's a global project, you would have people from different states, New York or Wyoming or South Dakota. Just reach out to, on social media, reaching out to educators who are also willing to connect, because that's the whole concept. Or you can take it one step further and make connections with people in a different part of the world. Now, the only caveat here is that you have to consider time difference, because if it's daytime here, for instance, it might be nighttime in Pakistan, in India. So you just have to be creative with how you are connecting with others.
Samara,
Yes.
sorry, just question. So that's interesting to me.
Mhm.
So how do you know who's reading the book? Like, is there a portal, a website that you go to that has
Yes.
information so you can connect? Just say
Yes.
a neighboring school district, because we're a small school. I mean, we
Yes.
have 1 4th grade class.
Yes.
So, being able to connect to,
Mhm.
say, Nacogdoches
Yes.
or something like that to read.
So that's a very good question. And I was going to say, when this happens, when and I'll check the dates, but around October, or that is generally end of September, October, that is generally when it starts. So if now you can create your own cohort. So if it's within, or if you know of a neighboring school, the easiest would be probably just sending out an email to, looking at the website and sending out an email. But that's the most basic way. But on Twitter, if you search hashtag GRA 2022, so that is the year that we're in, you would find lots of educators that are participating. On Facebook, there is a huge group of Global Read Aloud. So if you just search by Global Read Aloud, and I have, so for instance, this is the Global Read Aloud main page. And there are lots of educators, like there are 15,000 people that follow it. So, and over here, sometimes people are literally asking for connections. Like, these are the books that are for this year's. So, and then they have other groups specific for elementary or for middle school years. So these Facebook groups have been a huge, huge support in that sense. Did that answer your question? Ronnie, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, so Facebook has a lot of those groups. And then of course, if you search on Twitter, and the other thing is, even if you're not connecting with other learners and teachers, which is a great thing, the authors of these books are also very, very active on Facebook. So if you just tweet out, and I'll share an example in a minute, but if you tweet out to the authors of those books, like for Amal Unbound, the author is Aisha Saeed, and she was so she still is, but she was so active during that time that my kids would post questions to her, specifically asking her questions on Facebook, and she would create a video every week. I mean, not just my kids, anyone in, like, she had this option where all the kids in the world would post questions, and she would pick like 5 questions and she would answer them on her website. So that was also, so the authors are active too. So even if you want to keep it contained to just your classroom, if you tweet out to the authors, they are very, very active as well. Now, just because I've been sharing about my experience, this is a teacher who partnered with me on both the projects. So we started off with Amal Unbound, and then the following year we talked about Front Desk. So I'm going to show you this video.
My name is Christina, and I teach grade 5 in Richmond Hill, Ontario. As part of my language program, I introduced the Global Read Aloud a few years ago. I connected my students with students in the United States. It has turned into an incredible, authentic opportunity for myself to learn, as well as for my students. The first year, we connected over Amal Unbound, the story of a girl in Pakistan. The second year, Front Desk, story of a girl named Mia in California. We connected our students over buddy letters, making them into pen pals, which they loved. We also had them engaging in book talks where they had to create questions, deep, authentic questions, and then engage in conversations, almost like a book club. They had to ask questions, answer questions, respond to questions, think about deep questions, made them really think about the book. They loved it and could do it for hours. We also exchanged boxes with items that are unique to our area. This was definitely a favorite. Sammy and Popcorn came from Texas, and they very quickly became the classroom mascots. The kids loved it. They loved exchanging items. Then I had a chance to come to Texas and see a little bit of Texas culture, cheerleaders, Texas food, even had a chance to go and see the rodeo. Incredible chance. Then I had a chance to go to Richard J. Lee Elementary School. I had a chance to work with and see how teachers taught in their classrooms, how they engaged with their students, how they started their school year, how they started their day. The teachers there were so incredible and so welcoming. I even had a chance to meet a few fellow Canadians. Since then, I've continued to connect with May over math, and even this year, her students taught my students how to use Reality Composer. The Global Read Aloud is so much more than just a project or a book club. It allows our students to create memorable experiences, to learn from other students, and it allows us as teachers to connect as humans. It creates connections that could last a lifetime.
So Christina was a teacher in Wyndham Ridge, Richmond, Canada, and she was teaching 5th grade at that time. We partnered for 2 years, and then I invited her to visit Canada, and she stayed with me for 2 weeks. So it was just a lot of fun. And I'll share a little bit about the box because that was really the highlight of our projects. But really, what do you need to design this lesson? All of the options are, I mean, there's so many things that you can do depending on the comfort level of the educators. There is slow chat I mentioned earlier that happens online where on Twitter, where you can post a question and other teachers can answer. So that's really all the kids have to do is come up with a question, and the teacher can post the question that other learners can answer. We've done so many Zoom hangouts where kids are just having those same discussions on a Zoom call, or if your district has a Google Hangout, then they can do a Google call. We did pen pals. Now, well, I'll talk about the postcard exchange because that's happening too, but pen pals was just a new way of just sharing Google Docs. So Christina's class and my class, we would have folders for each of the month. And our goal was that our kids would talk to each other. Now, this does not necessarily have to be about the book, but it's just about building those relationships. So they would just write letters to each other. And that became an authentic practice for learning how to write letters and the structure of letter writing and communication. How are you communicating with somebody, asking them questions, seeking information, sharing information about yourself? So that became our pen pals. And they would add pictures to their computer skills. They learned so much about adding pictures or color to their letters. Oh, sorry, keeps flipping. I talked about Flipgrid a little bit. It became, you know, it's just an easier way, especially if your times don't coincide. This would work especially for departmentalized classes because you have a restricted time. Now, I mentioned that Facebook group. So sometimes what happens, actually every year, what happens is that there's a postcard exchange where one teacher from each state signs up and somebody gets all the addresses. You have to share your physical address of your school. And throughout the 6 weeks, you receive postcards from different states. So you have to mail out a postcard, and you receive postcards from different states. So what happens is it becomes a great opportunity to learn geography and realize where those different, you know, where in the world or where in the country people are reading. And my 5th graders, I was monumentally surprised at how few of them know how to write their address on an envelope, on the back of an envelope, because they don't do it. So they would take up the whole space on the back of the envelope to write their addresses, or it would be all in one line. So just that aspect of how do you post and how do you exchange or how do you mail out a snail mail, and then the level of excitement when they would receive a postcard from Denver, or when they received a postcard from Massachusetts or New Orleans. It was just excitement. And then we would post it, or I had a map in my classroom, and we would put a thumbtack of where it was. Padlet is also a great way to easily share digitally. Any questions about connecting with other people? Okay. And that takes me to the fun part about this project, which is the connection. What activities will actually connect the learners? So there are lots of ways. You could have a paper pencil journal where kids are taking notes, and oh my gosh, sorry. People could take notes and share their thoughts. But then, you know, you could have Google Slides where it's like a journal that the students maintain. If you use Apple apps, you could make them on Keynote or Numbers. Any learning management system. Our campus uses Schoology a lot, but there's Google Classroom. You could have assignments and stuff shared there, or like I said, just paper pencil. In this project, there should be links for both the front desk, but I would like to quickly share one on Google Slides. This is the presentation that I made for Amal Unbound when my kids were doing Amal Unbound. And this is a basically, and this is for I did it for my 5th grade learners, but this is basically a, I mean, essentially an 81 slide Google slide, but it lasts them the whole 6 weeks. So all these activities would last them for 6 weeks, and based on the pace of the class. So it would have activities, and I'm not going to go through the intro part because it's just the background. But for instance, when we started week 1, we talked about one of the quotes. Like this one was, "I knew helping my family was what the eldest daughter did, but this time after school with Miss Sadia wasn't just fun, it was important." So just to get the kids hooked on, the book. So maybe they would be intrigued about, they would be intrigued about why is it important for the eldest daughter to do something, and who is Miss Sadia, and why was this time fun? So just get them hooked about predicting what do you think the book is about. We went over vocabulary because the book had a lot of words that were in native language. So kind of go over that vocabulary. There were discussion questions. We talked about summary writing. And then I had fun with the culture, because culture is such a huge part of who our kids are. So I always had a cultural connection, a little activity that they had to do in order to connect with the culture that was represented in the book. And of course, that could be done with any book. But so the kids had to follow the same pattern every week. So we would start with a quote, vocabulary, discussion questions. And then the second week, the focus was on learning about conflicts. So the first week we focused on summary writing. The second week we focused on conflicts. So there's one concept that was taught. So I don't want teachers to think that just because you're reading a project, you're not doing anything that is related to your state standards. So you have to cover that as well. But how would you use a book, a fiction book, or whatever book of your choice to connect with content? So there was that happened. And then we've already talked about this. This was last year. So like I said, it starts somewhere between October 5th and it goes on till November 12th, around that time. Every year, the dates are a little bit different, but you can find that information on their website. just to be cognizant of, well, you know what? Kids are important, so I'm going to share, this is one of my former students, and I want to share her thoughts on Global Read Loud.
Hi, my name is Pedro, and I was with Ms. Khan from 2018 to 2019. The Amal and Bound project was a fun and different thing from what we've done in class before. I enjoyed it because the project kept me engaged. Amal and Bound, the book itself, was very inspirational and showed a lot of girl power. We had small activities, and we also collaborated with a class from Canada. Reading with the class was a very fun experience. We got to communicate with kids one-on-one. It was nice to learn about them and their different ideas and opinions. Some of the activities we did and I enjoyed were postcards exchanged with the class from Canada and making scones. Thank you. Bye.
So she was my student when we were teaching in 5th grade. But throughout the book, there were certain things that happened, and we tried to host those activities in our class. So a major part of the book was that every evening, the antagonist and his family would have an evening tea, kind of like a high tea. And so I got in touch with our school's head chef, our district's head chef, and some parent volunteers, and we offered high tea for our staff. So our the school chef, she kind of talked to the kids about what is tea and how are things, because most of our kids had never had sandwiches, petite sandwiches, or scones for that matter. So, and this is little relish on toast. So they made that for the tea. It was around November time, so it was kind of like a Thanksgiving treat for our teachers. A great opportunity to involve parents. So much math because they had to measure the ingredients and they had to make sure that they were cutting in a certain way. So timing of how long things have to be baked, dividing up on the trays. So all of that kind of became part of one of the activities that we did. And it got them out of the classroom and doing something that was non-traditional. So that was one way that we connected with specialists. Global connection, both Christina and my kids, we talked about postcard exchange and the box. So she sent me a box of all things Canadian. So you can see they had some strange chips there. They had an all dressing Ruffles, some potato sticks. Her kids glued maple leaves on a heart. There was this book, Giraffe and the Bird, which was in English and in French because her kids learned French. Maple syrup she sent from there. And we sent stuff that was kind of, you know, Texans, pecans, and some of the Oreo flavors that they don't have there. We sent those, M&M flavors, our school shirts, recipes, and all things that we thought were kind of Texas. And there was a boot, a Texas boot. And this was the global connection. This is what we did in our classroom. So we would get postcards from different countries, and then we would color them on the map or put a thumb tag. This was a hot favorite for kids because they just like seeing where in the world we're getting a postcard from. Book talks were on Zoom or on Google Hangout, where kids had a little matrix where they had to make questions. So this was like, who is, what did, and, you know, so they had to fill out this matrix, and the goal was to try and get as many blue and green as you can because they would be your high level questions. The pink quadrant would be kind of like your low level questions, like who is Amal, or, you know, who is Miss Sadia. So those would be your simple questions. But how will Jamal get caught? So the kids had to prepare these questions, and when they got together, they would take turns asking each other and then jot down the thoughts of, oh, sorry, my mouse is very sensitive. They would jot down their thoughts. We talked a little bit about pen pals. So this is a little video, like a little visual of what it looked like. So we would have a September folder and all the letters from September would be here. The kids would share it with me. I would, kind of proofread and then put them in the folder, and then she would share them with her learners. So we had one for September, we had one for October, and so on. So it was a easy way for our kids. Each of her learners was assigned to each of my learners, and they kept that connection throughout the year. So it was a one-on-one. And then, like I mentioned, it's very important for kids to have cultural connections, because it connects them to their identities and who they are. So for example, front desk, the main character is set in China. So maybe there could be some connections with the history or geography there. Amal and Bound was set in Pakistan. The Bridge Home is set in India. The book Refugee is beautifully written from the perspective of refugees from Germany, Cuba, and Syria. So these are different timelines as well, not only different countries, but different periods that they're set in. A Long Walk to Water is set in Sudan. They have a huge project where they do a lot of charity work that helps with getting clean water in Sudan. And then Esperanza Rising with Mexico. The last thing is author visits. Like, you can reach out to the authors, because usually schools try to get at least 1 or 2 authors to visit their class. But if you wanted to get a guest speaker for any field, this would be a great opportunity as well. So we had the author visit our campus, and she talked to the learners about her process of writing and how long it took her 10 years to write this one book. But just sharing those small things with the kids, and how she went through the process of collaborating with a graphic artist to go through the book, the cover of the book, just all those things that, the kids think about, but you don't really get direct answers to them. But you can tweet those out, but you can have them visit as well. And of course, this last slide is about resources. If you want to collaborate with your instructional coaches or the digital learning coaches, or librarians are amazing as far as a book selection or activities are concerned. So, any questions that you have? That brings us to the end. But any questions that you have for me?
I think it's great.
Oh,
Sorry, Christina.
yeah.
Go ahead. You can go ahead.
No, I'm fine. Go ahead. I'm fine.
I was just going to say, I think it's great. A lot of times I feel like, because we are a small school, and, I haven't branched out enough, I guess, to see what's out there that we can bring in. I'm trying to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
But I think this is a great resource. As I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm taking notes, and I'm just thinking of what I want to tell my 5th and 6th grade ELA teachers. Like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing, and I might reach out to you when it comes to it. So I think this is a great thing. So pretty neat.
And that's the whole thing. It doesn't even have to be in your neighborhood. It could be somewhere completely different, because there are tons of schools that participate, whether they're small schools or they're bigger districts. It just gives us an opportunity to connect. But absolutely, yes, let's partner.
Well, and we're so sheltered, I guess, in our thinking. I see a lot of that in our school. We have great kids, but they're very narrow-minded because they've only been around what they've been around. And
Yes.
so I came from Houston, so I grew up down there, and so I've seen different, cultures and different things. But a lot of our kids, they only know their peers.
Yeah.
And so, this is a great
And
way of introducing that and
and
seeing the human side, because they not understanding that we're all the same, even though we have, different beliefs and look different and stuff like that. And so I think that's great.
and it's such an easy way to, I mean, there might be a small school somewhere else, and I even had one teacher who did say that she connected with a small rural school where she had, and this may not be, I'm not trying to say this would be your district, but she said that she had 6th graders, 7th graders that were driving, or there was a parent who you know, they shared how they would milk a cow or something, and the schools shared that. But it's just, it would be eye-opening to my kids to see, like our kids to see that, because they wouldn't see that easily, or at least here. They would see it in their home country, but not here. Like snow was such a big thing because it would be hot here, but there's so much snowfall and the kids are still coming to school. There's a little bit of snow here and schools shut down, but they had so much snow and the kids had their snow gear. So just those things for our kids and their kids was just interesting to see, just pictures of that and all that. But it connects learners and just opens, they travel without traveling. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea overall. I think it's a great idea. I enjoy reading for fun, and I wish kids nowadays had that opportunity. And so I think this is a method of getting them into it, just to get the passion for reading. It's like you said at the beginning. I mean, it's very much, you know, read this book to answer these questions, and you know, it's because you have to. Why? Because I said so.
Yeah.
And so to also you know, to Ronnie's point, we're a very, very small school. We have one kindergarten, one first, you know, all the way through 5th. And so it's hard for our kids to branch out to peers their age. And so doing something like this would be good for my kindergartners. And even I thought about, you know, partnering with a school like with Ronnie or something like that, you know, partnering with one of those kindergarten classes. And maybe if we're not doing necessarily the same book as the global outreach one, but we choose one between us, or the teachers, you know, choose one a week or whatever, it could be similar.
Yes. And it could be anything really. It doesn't even have to be a book. You can connect on anything. Our kids, initially, we stopped doing it after, like for the past couple of years, but we did something called a mystery Skype, where it's an introductory activity where, for example, if Kristen, if you had a class, your class, and Ronnie, your class, the kids don't know exactly where they are, but they have to ask, this is more of a geography thing, but they have to ask questions yes and no questions related to where you are, kind of like 20 questions. And then they have to guess. I remember doing that one time, and in my class, you could see the flag, and Christina's class immediately guessed that we were in Texas. So you have to be careful around those things. But yes, there's so many opportunities. The whole point is for kids to, like you said, Ronnie, meet people outside of their own city, their own community, just so they can broaden their thing. Be curious, develop that curiosity. So.
Hey, Samira, man, what a great program this is, and a great idea. Just the model of it.
Yeah.
Is awesome. It does, even if you don't use the specific group to do it. I'm curious, you know, how would you encourage teachers that were maybe reluctant? Because a lot of teachers out there are very uncomfortable with the subject of culture. And you know, we're having 2 examples of talking about how when you're in certain localities, and it doesn't matter whether you're small or large, that you can have your perspective kind of you know, limited to the people that are right around you.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage people to get outside their comfort zone and use something like this?
Well, there are two aspects, right? So the first is to try something new, right? So teachers are hesitant about that, and even in our district, we started with, I don't know if you're familiar with the Lucy Calkins curriculum. It's for English language, reading, writing, phonics. When we had a little bit of choice before, but when that started, all choice went to the side. So teachers like, well, I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just going to follow this. I think that's when the role of an instructional leader, or in my case, a coach comes in, an instructional coach, where you just have to sit with them, try to get to know what they want to do, and start small. I don't think anyone has to do anything big on a grand scale. I just shared my ideas of, these are the various things that I did. You could just start small with, just do one conversation with another teacher, or just have a like, or just do a start with Twitter. So that aspect of start, and it's a project that happens every year. So maybe one year you could try it out small and then see, maybe add one more thing. Don't have to go all out. So that's the first aspect of trying something new. Now, again, the cultural aspect, I was able to do that just because of the book and just because of what it was my culture. For Amal Unbound, it was set in my country. So I was able to share that. But again, the level of introduction into culture that you bring in, that is also up to you. Because again, I wouldn't want my learners or their parents to get turned off. And these things you start off slowly. So even if, for instance, in front desk, we're talking about China and immigration, which is a very controversial topic, initially I would just start with, where in the world is China? And what is the population like? Or what do they eat there? And start with those small things that just develops curiosity. And once the kids get engaged, hopefully you'll get some questions that are valid, or some questions that they're curious about. Well, why did this person come here? It's just building on those. And I think that's when the difference between, how you have those scripted curriculum and relying on what the kids are curious about, what that comes in. I wouldn't want to be the teacher who imposes my opinion or my beliefs on the kids. I would want the kids to be curious enough to ask, and then I answer that. That's how I would take it. I think, especially in elementary classes, I would take a very slow, approach to introducing culture, because especially these days, I think the topic can get very, very controversial. And I wouldn't want to be in that situation where I'm making the kids uncomfortable or their parents uncomfortable. That's not my agenda. So I would just want them to be curious about what is outside Irving, Texas, or what is outside Dallas, or what is outside, because I would want to know. I would want to travel to those places. I would want to see. I'd be curious. And our goal is to develop that curiosity, I think.
I kind of, I like what you're saying about not being too quick to jump with those hot topics.
Yeah.
I just think right now it's a tough time. I mean, just from everybody's perspective. And so, kind of backing off of that a little bit, but kind of getting the ball moving forward. And I thought about a book that I presented my kindergartners with, and it was called This Very Tree. And it was about 9/11. And it was, I mean, I cried during it, reading it to them. I mean, it was intense, but it was about New York City and and what happened and the rebuild and everything in that. And so for them, they had never seen a city like that. I mean, and we have Houston, but these kiddos don't go to Houston. I mean, they stay in their little small town right outside of Houston. And so just even the current events that you were talking, or not, that one's not current, but I mean, you know what I mean? Events that occurred in other states that are big deals. Anyways, that was, it kind of stays away from the cultural issues, or not even, I wouldn't say cultural, being just the hot topics.
Yeah.
But still hits a topic hard.
And see, we saw that happen, or we experienced that event. Like we talk about 9/11 on Patriot Day on September 11th when it happens. So also understanding the kids weren't even born. Like in our elementary school, the kids weren't even born at that time. So their question, when you talk about it, again, if you keep it's hard, but if you keep a neutral perspective and listen to them, some of their questions are like, yeah, I don't know why people didn't think like that, or yes, so it's just getting them curious enough where they ask questions, because I think that's what the problem is. They're not, we do, like you said, we do like, okay, I have to cover A, B, C, D, and then you have to, there's no room for that discussion or that question or seeking to know. That I think that is what's lacking in our education.
Yeah, Samir, I just want to thank you for the session because in what you presented there, there were at least 6 to 8 examples of books that could be used.
Oh,
And so the practical application of what is the resource that's out there that I can use?
yes.
Because I think there are teachers that are very interested in doing something just to broaden perspectives,
Yes.
or to have kids think about different things. And
Yeah.
not an objectional way or confrontational way or anything like that, but just they don't know what resources are out there. And you provided 6 to 8 of them right there for them to latch on to. So I think that was awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to stop here.